Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. If you guys want to, feel free to turn on your camera to make this, just kind of simulate that personal webinar or panel that we would have had. So you don't have to keep your videos off, but that's up to you. Also, one more point is we are recording this Zoom. So if anyone has any issue with that, you can just private message me, but we're going to be recording this and then putting it up onto the Medcorps YouTube channel. Just about one more minute and then we'll get started. Also, for anyone new who just joined, you guys can feel free to turn on your camera if you want to make this more personal, but it's up to you if you guys want to keep it off. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Everyone, thank you so much for joining. This is the MSJ Medcorps Medical School student panel. This is our first time doing this since our inception, so we're very excited for all of you to be here today. And thank you very much for signing up and joining us on a Friday. We hope that you learned a lot from this event, and the 8 of us are also very excited for these 4 amazing speakers we have today. So we'll just briefly introduce all the officers. I'll give a brief rundown of the agenda, and then we'll jump right in. So my name is Yusuf Rashid, and I'm the president of Medcorps here at Mission.
My name is Harsh Karnani, and I'm a co-vice president at Medcorps.
Hi, my name is Kushal. I'm also a co-vice president of Medcorps.
I'm Sriyansh, and I'm a treasurer at Medcorps.
I'm Mahara. I'm the secretary.
I'm Angela, and I'm the activities coordinator.
Thank you, guys. So for today's event, we have a very exciting agenda for everyone. So we're going to start off with the panelists kind of giving some background about themselves so you guys get a better understanding of where they're coming from, and hopefully that can help tailor your questions to them. After that personal background, we're going to have guiding questions for them. So the team and I have prepared 7 guiding questions to ask them. And they're going to take turns answering, and you guys can listen in at that point. That'll take around 20 or so minutes. So we're going to be planning on finishing the guiding questions at around 3:15, 3:20. Once we hit 3:20, we're going to keep it more open, and we're going to have a live Q&A session. So after hearing all the responses, if you guys come up with some more questions, or if there was a question you originally had that you didn't get answered, that would be the time to ask. Once we get to the live Q&A, I'll review it once again, but obviously just raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask. And then after the Q&A, we'll just have a wrap-up session. We have a feedback form for you guys because we want to keep making these events as great as possible for you. I will give it off to Angela now, and we can get started with a personal background.
Okay, so now we'll be having the panelists give a brief personal background, including where they attended high school, where they attended their undergrad, and what school they're currently attending, and a few of their hobbies and interests. So Hamza will go first, followed by Haroon, Clyde, and then Aditya.
Yeah, hey everyone. Can I get like a thumbs up if you guys can hear me? Anyone?
We can
Solid. Yeah, my name's Hamza. I grew up in Sunnyvale, not too far from Fremont. I went to Wilcox High School in Santa Clara. I don't know if any of you guys know that area well. Went to UCLA for undergrad, majored in biology, minored in like atmospheric and oceanic sciences. I'm a third year now at UCSF Medical School. Interest, like professionally, maybe like emergency medicine. If I go surgical, I might go like orthopedic surgery. I'm on like a medicine rotation right now. I'm in the hospital and like I am loving it. So thinking about medicine, yeah.
So Haroon can go next.
Yeah, thank you. So I went to Mission, graduated 2015. I then went to UCLA undergrad where I met Hamza. I was a bioengineering major there. Stayed here for medical school. So right now I'm a second year at UCLA's medical school. As for interests, I'm looking into eye surgery, otherwise known as ophthalmology. And I think, did you guys ask for hobbies as well? Yeah, so for hobbies, just like to run, dance, try to keep up with Yusuf when I come back home and try to go for runs with him.
So Clyde, feel free to go next.
All right, hey guys. So went to high school down in Houston, Texas, and then college went to University of Texas at Dallas, where I majored in biomedical engineering. From there, I came to A&M, which is where I'm a medical student at, and I first did my MBA before starting medical school as part of a dual like MD MBA program. It's like a 5-year program, and then as for interest, I would say I'm thinking either if it's internal medicine, possibly cardiology, but if I go surgical, then probably orthopedics. And then for hobbies, I would say running and lifting. Really, that really helps to like relieve a lot of stress in med school.
Lastly, Aditya.
Cool. Hey guys, my name is Aditya Gupta, and so I actually was born in India, and then we moved to Fremont when I was 2 years old. The only reason I bring this up is because I used to live in Fremont, went to Millard Elementary School, if any of you went there. But then we moved to Tracy, so I went to high school at Tracy High School in 2014, and then went off to USC actually, which is funny because we have 2 UCLA alum. I didn't know that, that they were UCLA previously, which is just fun. But yeah, I did USC biomedical engineering. And then in 2018, I graduated from USC and then went on to Texas A&M to pursue my MD PhD there. So this kind of ties into my interest. My interest in medicine is, as of so far, like pretty restricted to neurosurgery. My PhD will be in neuroscience. And so my whole path in MD PhD is kind of geared towards. In terms of hobbies and interests, I'm very upset because of quarantine, because I can't do my favorite hobby, which is going to concerts. I've seen like over 150 artists live, like just because I live behind the Shrine Auditorium in LA when I lived at USC. So just went to concerts left and right, but really get an opportunity to do that recently at all. But once quarantine is over, I look forward to a few shows here and there. But yeah, those are my interests.
Thank you guys very much. So now we'll get going into the guiding questions. And just as a recap for the panelists, we'll be each asking you one question and just raise your hand if you'd like to tackle this one. And we'll call you and it'll automatically create an order as well. So I'll hand it off to Kushal. I think he's going to be asking the first question.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So to just get started with the first question, what inspired you all to pursue a career in the medical field? And when did you realize that this was the right choice for each of you? So if anyone wanted to go first, feel free.
Go ahead, Clyde.
All right, so what inspired me to pursue a career in medicine? I would say it started off from a young age. My my uncle, he's a pediatric psychiatrist, and I mean, I've always just kind of like looked up to him since I was young. And I mean, he was, me as a child and looking up to him, like he's over like 6'5" or something. So I was like, wow, like just like who's this amazing person, And then growing up and just watching him and hearing some of the stories that he would tell me just sounded so amazing. I was like, man, like what is this field of medicine? So that was my initial exposure to medicine. And then whenever I moved here to America, so sorry, I forgot to include in my background that I'm originally from Cameroon, which is in West Africa. So whenever my parents and we moved here to the US, and my mom started, she then became a nurse, and also just seeing her, compassion to medicine, and just again her sharing stories to me of just like the gratitude that patients would express to her, whenever she, let's say, caught some sort of error, or like she just like gave them great bedside care, and just hearing some of her stories were just like further pushed me. I was like, wow, like what, like medicine sounds amazing. I need to learn more about this. And then as I like, I was in high school, started shadowing, and in college as well. As I got greater exposure to it, I just fell in love with the field of medicine. And then I would say there wasn't any like one defining moment where it's like this happened and then boom, like I then became interested. But like all those things kind of accumulated over the years, and everything just kind of kept pointing me towards medicine. Everything that I was trying to accomplish in life, like just trying to help people, trying to help heal people. All of that pointed me towards wanting to do medicine. So that's why I'm here. Um, and I said, as for the when did I truly realize that it was the right choice? Again, after all the shadowing, I think probably like in my sophomore year of college, it was cemented that what, medicine is what I really want to do, and that was highlighted by shadowing as well as volunteering experiences.
Thank you very much, Clyde, for that answer. Do any of the other panelists want to answer that one? All right, go for it, Aditya.
All right, so how did I get my interest in medicine? To me, I've always liked accomplishing difficult things simply because I got greater satisfaction out of that than accomplishing something that was not that hard. And I also like last minute stressful situations. So like you guys can probably see my answer is very geared towards my interest I mentioned earlier, which is neurosurgery. Like like I said, I'm an MD PhD student, so going at it for 8 years before I applied to residency programs. But so as a result of that, I like really had to think through what are some of the things that would be very stressful, but once you put in enough time and effort, it could also be learned. And there were like very few options that like really fell before me, because I've always had an extremely predominant interest with the brain. It's always been an organ that's just always blew my mind, because as humans, it is the one organ that deviates us from all other species, is our brain. So I've always been extremely interested by our brain, wanted to do something with that in the field of medicine. And I'm here today doing an MD PhD. So, yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else?
We can move on to the second question.
Oh, I think Hamza wanted to answer.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Hamza. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Hamza, you're muted.
Yeah, Hamza, you're muted.
Thank you. I'm just going to go briefly at risk of not repeating a lot of the same things, but I really liked medicine from when I was in like middle or high school. Knew it was going to be like a very like challenging path. You're told that like very regularly, so wasn't always sure if it was going to be like in the cards. But things that I really liked about it is like, one, it's a very different. I mean, depending on what you go into, every day is like very different. Every patient is like very, very different. So there's a lot of like complex problem solving and like critical thinking. I feel like it's hard to get bored of your job when like every day is different and it's like very stimulating. And even if you do get bored of your job, like There's like so much like research that can be done. You can always be answering new questions. That's something like I really love about medicine. You can go anywhere with it as like a job, like, it's like always in demand. And just like working with people and serving them is like very deeply like satisfying, like both in terms of like, there is the gratitude, but also just like seeing progress over time and working with others.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Those were all really great answers. So let's move on to the second guiding question. Can you describe your experience in medical school? So what is life like as a medical student?
Go for it, Harun.
Life in medical school is pretty interesting. It actually, for me at least, reminds me a lot of high school. The reason why is because in undergrad, especially at a place like UCLA, it's a massive school. You're with thousands of people. You're not going to see the same person every single day. But in medical school, you're very much with the same group of people 24/7, basically. So whether it's, for activities that you're doing, especially now in quarantine, whether it be anatomy lab, which I just came back from, or whether it be outside sessions or just hanging out, you're always with the same group of people. But what contrasts with that is that in medical school, you're introduced to what medicine could be. And what medicine really entails is, the best of life. You see people who are treated from like stage 3 cancer and they're healed and they're able to walk and go have fun and not have to worry about it in complete remission. But you also see the worst, where you go to the ER and you might see someone who's 12 and just got hit by a car and that's it. So what I love about it is that it's a very real specialty. It's very hard to not understand how special this type of work could be and how impactful the work is for everyone involved, whether it's the physician, the parent, or the patient. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a pretty good introduction to the medical field in particular, and I love it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that answer. It was really in depth. So does anyone else want to try and answer that one? Yeah, Hamza, go ahead.
One thing I was going to say, I think that just sets med school apart. I think the biggest contrast between like med school and maybe like undergrad and high school is like, when you're in high school, I feel like, it's grades, your SAT or ACT or whatever, and you're just in like however many clubs trying to get like leadership positions, trying to like volunteer to, apply to undergrad. And when you're in undergrad, it's the same thing. You're trying to get your GPA up, you're trying to study for your MCAT, you're trying to, being a part of like orgs and volunteer and work and all that, so you can apply to med school. But once you get to med school, you have like, you're going to apply to residency at some point, but it's a very different application. So your goal is just to become a good doctor. So you're just going to focus on like your grades. And I mean, everything's pass fail now, so it's not even grades. You're just going to focus on like, your learning and like you're exploring your own like personal interests. And of course, there's like lots of organizations and electives and volunteering you can do, but that's more out of like, you're doing it purely because it's something that, you love and enjoy and want to learn about. And it's less because like, I feel like, oh my God, I have to shadow, I have to research. So I think that's one thing that sets med school apart.
Yeah, thank you so much. Aditya can go next.
Okay, cool. One thing I wanted to share is that, so going back to the difficulty thing, medical school is indeed difficult, but one could also say that engineering is difficult, which was what my undergrad was in. So one experience I wanted to bring forth that that I had to learn from in medical school is that I had to deviate from difficulty of content to difficulty of quantity when I went from undergrad to medical school. Because in undergrad, my biomedical engineering courses, including some of the neural circuitry courses I've taken, are far more difficult than any of the content in medical school. But the fact of the matter is, the sheer amount of content that you have to know per every individual subject in medical school is infinitely more. So it's harder in the fact that it is just a much bigger load of information, not more difficult concepts. So discipline comes into play, constant refreshment of the material comes into play. It's like a different type of difficult academics, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was really in-depth. Thank you so much for your answer. Does anyone else want to add? Go ahead, Clyde.
Yeah, so definitely want to also, second that, because I mean, also did biomedical engineering, and I felt a very similar experience that a lot of content in medical school is not hard, but especially compared to biomed engineering. But yeah, just the amount of quantity. Also, just want to say, getting to medical school, I know it required me, especially at the very start, to switch and drastically alter how I studied. Because being an undergrad, I had a little bit more time, so to spend time on things. Whereas like medical school, you're always pressed for time, so you have to like understand it quickly and move on. So I know it was tough at the very start because it's trying to find a system that worked for me to be able to consume all this content and then regurgitate it not only on the exams but as well as like if I'm seeing actual like in real life patients. So it took a little, like I'll say probably the first 2 classes to like find a system that worked best for me. And I thought, oh, you know what? I can just come to med school and use the same way of studying that I've used, but that was not the reality. But once I figured out, like, you know what, this is a system that works for me, things got a whole lot better.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Does anyone have anything else to add before moving on to the next question? If not, then I'll hand it off to Angela for the third guiding question.
Our third guiding question is, what is the timeline for becoming a doctor? Go ahead, Aditya.
Okay, I'm going to get the depressing answer out of the way so all of you can share the happy answer afterwards. So since I'm doing an MD PhD, it is an 8-year program, and the 8 years isn't guaranteed if my PhD takes a little longer or a little less. Regardless, 8-year program to get the MD PhD, and then I'm really hoping to do a neurosurgery residency, which is then 7 years after that. So the path I'm taking is probably the longest path you can take. There's some perks to it, like an MD PhD is fully paid for, so you can graduate debt-free, but you do commit 8 years to that. So for my personal path, I am expecting 15 years before I am able to operate by myself on a patient. But now I'll leave it to the other panelists to share their timeline to becoming a doctor.
Yeah, thank you so much for the insight. Does any of the other panelists want to add on to Aditya's answer? Go ahead, Harun.
Yeah, first I just want to applaud Aditya for doing that. That's like you said, it's the longest path possible, and I have a lot of respect for that amount of patience and that amount of dedication. Typically in medicine, what happens is you're going to be doing 4 years of undergrad, and after that you do 4 years of medical school, then you can choose the residency. So that 4 years of medical school is guaranteed, but your residency time changes based on which residency you want to do. For something as serious and as complex as neurosurgery, as Aditya said, it could be 7-8 years. For something that is more broadly applicable, like internal medicine, it could be 2 to 3. So it depends largely based on what residency choice you want to do. But yeah, it varies a lot. But you'll find that when you get to this stage, the years matter, but you'll also find that you're just drawn to a specialty, and that specialty will most likely dictate whatever timeline you're going to be going forwards. But in general, I would say from starting undergrad to being able to work with a patient, the shortest time is maybe 10 years.
Thank you. So Hamza, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I was just gonna also briefly add that gap years are very, very common as something to take after undergrad, So typically, you do 4 years of undergrad or like 2 of community college, 2 of undergrad. And most people nowadays take at least 1 or 2 years off to work, to volunteer, to just like spend some time like before medical school or just like applying. So the average age of the person coming into medical school is like 24, 25-ish, even though usually when you graduate from undergrad, it's 22. I know Harun and I went straight through, but the average age of my class coming was like 22, 20, or 23, 24. I have classmates that, married, like a few kids, like in their 30s. There's lots of like non-traditional paths to medicine.
Thank you so much for that insight. Aditya, would you like to go?
Yeah, just one other quick thing. I like how Hamza mentioned the gap year. I also went straight into medical school, but I decided after like 1.5 years that I really needed a break from just finishing undergrad and going straight into 2 years of med school. So I took this year off. I am currently a Spanish substitute for the high school. I've honestly been kind of enjoying the job. But yeah, I'm going back to med school in January. But so yeah, even if you don't take a year off immediately, med school administration is super helpful. They will like work with you wherever, like whatever you need, whatever your needs are. Like they work with me. So I took this year off and then I'm going right back in 2021.
Thank you guys for sharing your experiences. I'm sure it was very helpful for all the students here. Next, I'll be handing it off to Harsh to ask the 5th question.
So our 5th guiding question is, oh, sorry, 4th guiding question is, what are the requirements to apply to med school? So that means like courses or any tests that you have to take. And what extra experiences can strengthen a student's application to prepare for med school or increase chances of admission? So primarily focusing on like what students can do in either high school or undergraduate years. Yeah, just use the raise hand feature if you have an answer. Harun?
Yeah, I can give this one a shot, but again, I'm interested to hear the other panelists' answers as well, because it differs a lot from person to person. So requirements. You'll find that whatever school you go to is going to have a pre-med track. So they'll have a pre-med advisor and they'll help you decide what specific classes will fulfill these requirements. But in general, you're going to be needing a few years of physics, a few years of math, a few years of life sciences, biology, a few years of social sciences as well, biochemistry, organic chemistry, regular chemistry. I think far more interesting than that, actually, because these classes are something that everyone is going to have to take, are what are the other like non-spoken about requirements to getting into medical school. And this varies a lot, but the general categories that these tend to fall into are clinical volunteering, non-clinical volunteering, leadership, and other activities and hobbies. So for clinical volunteering, this can be anything from, volunteering at a nearby clinic and serving there as a medical assistant or as someone at the front desk, to actually going on a mission trip and being able to work across the world with organizations that recruit undergrad students. Non-clinical volunteering could be, for example, like working in a soup kitchen. Research is also very important. So that's typically something that you'll have to do in undergrad to some capacity. And then leadership experiences, that's another soft requirement. It's good to have some leadership experiences under your belt, but not necessary at all. And then what's most interesting to me actually is that you'll find that all of your friends who are going into pre-med will be very knowledgeable about all these other requirements, but the medical school admissions officers that I've talked to at least, and others that I know and heard about, they all also look for something else. So some like hobby, something that you enjoy doing. And I found that in my interviews, that's what they wanted to talk about more than these other activities. And I think that just goes to show that in medicine, they're not looking for people who are geniuses, who are experts and who are leaders. They're also looking for humans. And your hobbies are what show that.
Yeah, Clyde, you can answer next.
Yeah, Harun did a great job explaining, everything. And yeah, as you said, the requirements varies by based off of each school, but definitely all the courses that he mentioned, you're gonna have to take. And then for sure, to add on to what he said about like admissions committees are looking for well-rounded people, because I mean, yeah, you can hit the necessary MCAT requirement for a certain school and all of that, but then they want to see like, okay, what really sets you apart, because everyone else is gonna have those same boxes checked, so like that's why um they always recommend make sure that you're doing things that you're interested in. So like, I mean, if you're like, you may look at everything, like, so as example, I never liked research for like the longest time. I was like, God, this just seems so boring. I don't want to do this, right? But then I didn't realize. Well, I didn't have like talk to the the admissions advisors for med school, and then they were like, well, okay, why don't you focus the research that you're interested in? Like, I mean, sit down and look at what truly draws your interest, and then do research in that. And then like once I did, I loved it. I was like, well, okay, you know what? I was having this broad generalization about research that was wrong. So it was like, and I started applying that to almost everything that I was involved in, So it was like, okay, if like with the fact that I'm interested in helping other people and like serving the underserved, okay, let me go volunteer at like homeless shelters, or volunteer at food banks. So it's like basically tailor all your interests and like leadership experience, well, overall all your experiences to what you're most interested in, because that also help you like to shine whenever it comes to interviews. And yeah, as Haroon said, a lot of my med school interviews were discussions about like what I like to do in my free time, and that was most of the conversation, instead of like focusing on like my actual application and the GPA and scores and all that stuff that I got. So yeah, I would say definitely make sure that you're doing things that show and highlight your interests, because whenever it comes to interviews, you have to speak passionately about it, and then that would help you out in the long run.
Thank you. Hamza, you can go next.
I think those are both like fantastic answers. The one thing I wanted to mention, which is a bit of a sidetrack, is what would be like a good major to major in if you want to be pre-med. And you may hear this a lot, but it truly, truly like does not matter one bit. I think a lot of people come in thinking like, you got to major in like biology or physiology. And I majored in biology just because like I love it. I grew up watching like the Discovery Channel and Planet Earth, but like it doesn't matter even the slightest bit. And even when you apply, if you majored in something like dance or theater or like film, that'll just give you something like interesting to talk about during your interview. So as like corny as this sounds, like, follow your heart and major in whatever you think interests you and like, would be like good for you.
Yeah, Aditya.
I can just wrap this up by like beating a dead horse kind of, because this has been said several times, but I can like give an example of where like following what you enjoyed to do really worked out, because I did two things at USC that I absolutely loved. One was I took 7 philosophy classes because I just really like philosophy. and then the other thing I did was for my senior design project, I made an EEG that like guides you towards a meditative state by like trading this 3D printed device. But that was also something that was super interesting that I got to do, that I was personally like just interested in, because nobody wanted to be in a group with me for this design project. Like I did it by myself. And so just like actually things that really pique your interest and you're down to just go hard with those things, that's what's going to make you stand out for sure. Because my interviews were just 5 minutes of medical school talk and then like a philosophical dilemma, and like me and the interviewer just like going at it on it, and it was hilarious and it was awesome. So like, yeah, definitely have your own interests that you want to talk about during the interview. Like you don't have to let them guide the interview. they open the floor to you, it's your floor to talk on. So that's a piece of advice I would have.
All right, thank you. And Shriyansh will be introducing our fifth question.
Yeah, so our fifth question is, how are medical schools working amidst a pandemic? And do you think there will be any permanent change in the schools and the system? Yeah, Claude, you can go.
Yeah, so I guess I could start by just talking about how Texas A&M has handled it. Basically, everything has been, for the most part, moved online, and they've limited in-person activities unless they're absolutely mandatory. So I mean, for let's say if you have anatomy lab, I mean that's pretty much mandatory. So you can't really do that virtually. But like everything else, they really had to it's forced that not only A&M, but I know like a majority of schools to really consider that, okay, you know what, is it worth it to have our students year in person for these activities? And for a lot of them, the answer is no. And I would say, as a med student, I absolutely love it because it, for lack of a better word, it cuts out a lot of what I've considered nonsense in the past of just like, okay, why are we spending so much time towards this activity when we have so much to study and so much work to do? So I feel like it's really forced a lot of schools to become very efficient, and which means more free time for me to like not only study, but then to just do other things that I want to do in my free time. And do I think will there be any permanent change? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, with how long the quarantine has been going on, and like, I mean, I feel like we've all kind of had to adapt to this new norm of most things being virtually, and I feel like there'll be some sort of hybrid incorporated moving forward. I doubt everything will just go completely back to normal, because what this time has shown is that a lot of things don't really need to be done in person, and then it means less travel time. It means, and thus more time to everyone that's involved, both professors and students.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the great answer. Would anybody else like to speak on this? If nobody has anything else to say, I can hand it off to Yusuf for the last question.
Thanks, Shriyansh. So for our final guiding question, we kind of wanted to wrap it up and ask, what is the single most important takeaway you want the members to leave today with? After hearing all of your thoughts, what is the most important thing they should remember and take away from today's panel? We'll have Harun go first, and then Hamza.
I think the most important thing to take away from whatever we've said thus far is that there is a very clear path for how to get into medicine. It isn't some like mystic quest where you have to go find like a dragon and like find a key or whatever. No, there's a very straight path to get into medicine. The question really shouldn't be, do I want to go into med, or like the question shouldn't be how do I get into medicine? It should be, do I want to go into medicine? Because with all of the like positive things we've said today, it's also a very trying field. Like I have friends right now who are my age and are working for like Google and Microsoft, making six figures and loving what they do. So I remember when I was at Mission that one of the very unfortunate things about the school was that it kind of pressured everyone to go into either medicine or tech or something of the sort. And I would encourage you to really ask yourself if it's something you're interested in. And if it is, then you have a path that you can follow. And it's just about staying on that path and making sure that you're hitting the requirements, and you'll be here sooner than later.
Thanks, Harun. Hamza?
I actually really love that answer, and taking the time to shadow and make sure this is something that you're like committed to. But what I was gonna say was, I think it was like the best piece of advice I got as like a first year in college, and it's something that I've heard everyone else on this panel say in some way or another over the last hour. And it's just, I think when it comes to like medical school and admissions, you want to also like, how do you stand out from the crowd? And I think part of it is find something you're passionate about and try to work with it in as many like different ways as possible that like interest you. So for me, like working with underserved communities was something that was like very important to me coming in. It's something that I want to be a part of my career. It's, I think, something that's like shaping both what I do in med school and like the residency kind of program that I want to go into. And the way I did that in undergrad was, was working in like high schools, like teaching, was working in like underserved, like volunteering in like clinics. I was working in like the prison system for a little bit. I was doing like research regarding like working with like underserved populations in cardiology. So I think when it came to my application and like applying to UCSF, I think one thing they really liked was, or like any medical school, is just, like it's one thing to be passionate about something, but it's another thing to like, to have it on paper. Like it's not just talk, but like, this is something that you've been doing through like multiple aspects. That was something that was helpful for me.
Thanks, Hamza. Clyde, go ahead.
Yeah, so definitely, love the pieces of advice already shared. I would say another good piece of advice would be don't fear the time that it'll take. Like I know, again, shout out to Aditya for being able to like have the patience with an MD PhD. But then like the entire path, sure, you may sit and think like, man, like 4 years. Because I know you guys are in high school, so it's like some of you may be thinking, man, 4 years of, well, first I gotta finish high school, then 4 years of like undergrad, then I gotta do 4 years of medical school, then I gotta do God knows how long for residency. But I'll say to that, like the time goes by quickly. Like I mean, in honesty, I swear I blinked and like I'm ready in my second year, and the past year just went by so quickly, and then like days just go by so quickly. So before you realize it, you'll be done. So if medicine is truly something that you're passionate about, don't worry about the time. It will just go a lot faster than you expected to. And if you're truly passionate about it, I would just say keep up with it. Do all the things that you're supposed to do, and like put in the work. And I'm sure in a couple of years we'll be celebrating you guys getting in as well.
Thank you, Clyde. And Aditya, I think you wanted to make one last remark.
Okay, so one last thing I wanted to say, which will be directly relevant because we have mostly high school seniors, or I don't know if it's mostly high school seniors in the crowd, but for those of you going off to college, being in the pre-med community, it is very easy to stress oneself out because everyone around you will be doing a million things trying to get into medical school. And they'll all try to convince you that doing this, that, or the other will increase your chances of getting in. The fact in all of this is that the only thing that will increase your chances of getting into medical school is if you do the things you like to do and then explain that on your application. So you don't need to do a billion things. You just need to actively pursue the things that interest you when you get to college. And you don't have to be stressed out by the millions of things that other pre-meds around you in an undergrad campus will be doing. Just do what feels normal. Talk to your guidance counselors if your school has that, but don't let your peers be the reason you get stressed out.
Thanks, Aditya. And thank you to all the panelists for answering those guiding questions. I'm going to hand it off to Hirsch now for our live Q&A.
Yeah, so for the next 10 minutes or so, the members can ask questions that may not have been answered by now, or if you have any specific questions to ask any of the panelists. So if you have any questions, just use the raise hand feature. And before asking your question, make sure to introduce yourself with your name. And yeah, let's get started with that. If you have any questions, please raise your hand using the raise hand feature. Varun,
Hey guys, my name is Varun. I'm a senior at Mission. So I have a question for Aditya specifically. So I'm also super interested in neuroscience and possibly pursuing like a specialty in neurosurgery in the future. I know that's way down the road, and I know the path is really long. So I just wanted to know, like, what pushed you to pursue an MD PhD, especially with like the length of the residency program for neurosurgery.
Cool. So I'll give a very bare bones, honest answer to this. Going into med school, a lot of people tell you to like have an open mind, see what see what residencies interest you, this and that. But like, I mean, if you felt neurosurgery already, like I was kind of like you too, like even before medicine, it was neurosurgery for me. Like it wasn't just medicine, it was neurosurgery that interested me because of like how I mentioned the brain being just an amazing organ. So as a result, I'm like glad you've kind of realized this early on, because the reason I chose the MD PhD is I looked into who gets into a neurosurgery residency. And those individuals who got through med school, but then applied to a neurosurgery residency with a PhD in neuroscience, I think it was like 25 out of 28 that applied with a PhD in neuroscience got in. Because the field of neurosurgery is such that it's the newest field of medicine, perhaps. And as a result, they don't just need doctors who can practice it, they need doctors who can expand the field with their research as well, like figure out the new techniques to get inside, past the blood-brain barrier, et cetera, et cetera. So they need the researchers who are also doctors. So this field specifically is really looking for MD PhDs to pioneer the field forward. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have another question?
Hi, my name is Jessica, and I'm a sophomore at Mission. And my question is, why did you guys like choose to pursue an MD rather than a DO? And what exactly are the differences between an MD program and like a DO program? Thank you.
Yeah, so if any of the panelists want to answer that, you can just unmute yourself.
I'm like not very well versed in the response to this. So if one of the other panelists want to take a stab at this. Oh, Hamza.
Yeah, I can try this. My wife is actually, yeah, Harun's messaging me, that's funny. My wife is actually in DO school up at Toro, which is in Vallejo, who's actually Harun and Yusuf's cousin. But anyway, so MDs and DOs are both physicians and can practice just the same way like MDs can. They apply into the same specialties. So like last week I was working with a OB-GYN surgeon who's a DO. It's a newer practice than MDs. MDs have been around longer. DOs are less than like 80 or so years old. So there's fewer programs, but they're becoming more common every day. So what's the difference? So in DO school, you learn everything that you do in MD school, plus osteopathic medicine. DO stands for Doctor of Osteopathy, something like that. So that's a lot of like, it's a lot of like musculoskeletal movements and like releases. I kind of think of it as if you took medical school and added some like physical, like evidence-based physical therapy to it. DOs also tend to be more like caring more about like the overall wellness of the individual. I think they place more of an emphasis on that than MD schools do, although MD schools are coming there slowly, which is good. Overall, they tend to, so the training is more or less the same. Because there are fewer of them and it is like a newer field and if people like don't know about them as often, the programs also tend to be like a little less competitive to get into. So like GPA and MCATs tend to be like a little lower. But so if you're thinking about should I apply to MD or DO, most people apply to both. If you're considering DO, yeah, if it's something you're interested in, definitely try shadowing like a DO doctor and see if it's something you might be into.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the other panelists want to take a stab at that question? And if not, then we can move on to the next question that any of the audience members might have. Yeah, Clyde.
Sure, yeah, I'll just add on to it. Yeah, I'm not, pretty much I was gonna say, yeah, for the most part, I mean, there really is no limitation. Like, I mean, if like you can go either route and still be able to do whatever it is that you want to do. As for why I chose MD over DO, like, I mean, I just like, I think it was just like, oh, I think my mindset was, oh, I've always wanted to be an MD, so let me just go that route. So it wasn't really any like difference, like, oh, like I don't want to do DO, but and then I was gonna add that like a lot of the physicians that I first shadowed were actually DOs in hospitals, and like, I mean, like you can't even tell the difference, like who's an MD, who's a DO, because I think it doesn't really matter. Like they're also able to do the exact same thing. So yeah, if you're thinking that you want to do DO and follow more of the looking at like the patient as a whole, and then you can pursue that route. Or if you just want to do MD, then you can do MD, but there's no limitations when it comes to doing either of them.
Yeah, so really quick question that one of the members wanted to ask was specifically like to Haroon, how did missions like culture going to like such a STEM dominated school, which was so stressful, affect your career in the future? And like, how did you adjust going from like mission to medical school?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the pros, just because you guys are there right now. You guys don't have a choice whether or not you're at Mission. So the pros are that the work ethic you get at Mission, and for Clyde, Aditya, Hamza, like Mission is known for being very, very stressful for its students, sometimes too stressful, I would argue. So the work ethic that you get from Mission definitely helps you. Like I found my first year of bioengineering at UCLA to be easier than my junior year at Mission. And part of that is just because the Mission teachers are fantastic, but part of that is there's, kind of a toxic culture at Mission where it's very much about, grades, GPA 4.0s. So that's the positive thing, the work ethic you get out of that. And that's invaluable because there's going to be valedictorians from other schools who might not do as well in their first year and they might be surprised. But wherever you go, I'm sure you guys are going to do fantastic. The con to it is that I honestly feel that the lack of emphasis on the humanities at Mission definitely comes back to bite all of its students. All of my friends we're still close to this day, maybe 10, 12 of us, all of us went to Mission. And all of us found that because we didn't have a humanities background, it was very hard to, one, if we're in medicine, connect with patients. Because we're so used to numbers and stats and all this type of stuff that it's hard to like have a normal conversation about, something that they're passionate about. Two, we don't have great valves for stress relief. I find that at Mission, a lot of the students there are very much about grades and GPA and 4.0, but they don't have a way to actually de-stress. And that comes to bite you in college and in medical school if you don't find a way to do that. So I found that one of the best things that I did in undergrad was actually find a hobby in dance that is humanities. It's also about art. It's also about expression. And it's also about stress relief. So I think it prepared me in the sense that I got a great work ethic that I still value to this day. I still love the school. I'm like still in touch with Miss Rusu if any of you guys have her. And she's one of my favorite teachers there. Tell her I said hi if you guys have her. But I find that it's troubling that there's not much of an emphasis on the other aspects of being a person and being a normal functioning adult in America today.
All right, so one more audience question is that, so this person is interested in working out. So especially in medical school, how hard is it to maintain a balance between studying and being physically fit? If anyone wants to take a stab at that.
I go ahead and I'll talk about that. Honestly, it's not too hard, and I feel like it kind of goes towards the saying of like, you make time for things that matter to you the most. I find working out as a big way of relieving stress. Like, I mean, there's some pretty tough days in medical school, so I just told myself that, like, hey, like, I mean, if I, like, for my mental health, I need this, so like I then make sure to plan my day out and include, like, time for me to go to the gym. It's like I'd rather have time to go to gym instead of having that extra hour or two of studying, because I know that at the end of the day, like, I'll be better off down the line when it comes towards mental health. And like, I mean, it will like decrease my likelihood of being burnt out or having some sort of breakdown, or like I feel like because I keep working out, like, it just keeps me going on a lot of days, and then, I mean, it allows for me to not, like, just person crash or burn, because I feel like if I didn't have that, as well as just running in other healthy ways of relieving stress, I feel like I probably would have not gotten as far, or done as well as I've done so far. So yeah, make time for it, and it's definitely possible to even do it, like, on a daily basis.
Thank you for that. So thank you all for answering the audience's questions, and we'll be handing it off to Shriyansh now.
Yeah, we just have a feedback form for you guys to fill out to see how you felt about this meeting, so we can plan more events just like this in the future. I'll be sending the form in the chat, and you can fill it out as soon as possible would be preferred. So I sent it in the chat.
I also just want to say thank you to the panelists as well. I personally learned a lot from today, and I hope the rest of the audience did as well. If you guys want me to connect you with any of the other panelists today, just let me know, and I can make that happen. And thank you guys so much for coming on today.
Thank you guys for having us. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you guys
so
for
much.
organizing.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, guys.
All right.
Bye, guys.